May 17, 1943. 12:49 in the morning. The Möhne reservoir in the Ruhr Valley of western Germany. An Avro Lancaster bomber passes over the dam wall at 60 feet altitude. A 4,000 kilogram cylindrical mine separates from her bomb bay and skips across the water. The mine, backspun at 500 revolutions per minute, hits the dam wall, sinks, and detonates at 30 feet depth. The wall trembles and breaks. 330 million cubic meters of water begin to leave the reservoir. The flood wave will reach 80 kilometers downstream within 8 hours. It will kill approximately 1,294 people. 749 are sleeping Soviet women in a prisoner-of-war camp called Neum. Watch for an English engineer named Barnes Wallis. Watch for a 24-year-old wing commander named Guy Gibson. Watch for the third dam, the Sorpe, that did not break. 1940, the design office of Vickers Armstrong's Aircraft Company at Weybridge, Surrey, England. The chief design engineer was a 53-year-old civilian named Barnes Neville Wallis. He had designed the Vickers Wellington bomber. He held 23 patents. Wallis spent the early war thinking about the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heart of Nazi Germany. The Ruhr produced approximately 70% of Germany's steel. The Ruhr's industries were powered by hydroelectric dams. The largest were the Möhne, completed 1913, the Eder, 1914, and the Sorpe, 1935. Wallis calculated that destroying these three dams would deprive the Ruhr of 25% of its electrical power and most of its industrial water supply. The dams were defended by anti-aircraft guns, anti-torpedo nets, and air defense fighter cover. Conventional bombs from altitude could not penetrate dam walls 15 meters thick. Wallis's solution, sketched on the back of a Vickers blueprint envelope in March 1941, a bomb that would skip across the water surface, sink at the dam wall, and detonate at depth. The principle was the principle of Sir Walter Raleigh's broadside skipping cannon shot at the Battle of Cadiz in 1596. Wallis had read about it in a Royal Artillery journal. He tested the principle in his own garden. He used his daughter Elizabeth's marbles. He skipped them across a tin bathtub of water. He plotted the trajectories on graph paper. He discovered, by November 1941, that backspin was the key. A backspun marble could be made to sink at a chosen point by adjusting its initial spin rate. He proposed the principle to the RAF in March 1942. Senior officers were skeptical. Air Chief Marshal Arthur "Bomber" Harris dismissed the proposal as lunatic on April 12. Wallis was supported by Air Vice Marshal Sir Ralph Cochrane, commander of 5 Group. He authorized full-scale prototype development in autumn 1942. By April 1943, the prototype design, designated Upkeep, was finalized. Steel-cased cylindrical mine, 50 inches long, 60 inches in diameter, 9,250 pounds. It contains 6,600 pounds of Torpex high explosive. Detonated by hydrostatic pistols at 30 feet depth. Required release at 60 feet altitude, 220 miles per hour, 425 yards from target. March 21, 1943. The Royal Air Force formed a new bomber squadron to deliver Upkeep against the German dams. Based at RAF Scampton, Lincolnshire. The squadron's number was 617. Its motto, chosen at activation, Après moi, le déluge, French for, after me, the flood. The phrase of King Louis XV. The commanding officer was Wing Commander Guy Penrose Gibson, age 24. He was the youngest squadron commander in RAF Bomber Command. Gibson had been born on August 12, 1918, in Simla, in British India. He had attended St. Edward's School in Oxford. He had joined the RAF in November 1936. By March 1943, he had completed 173 combat operations, far above the standard tour of 30. He held the Distinguished Service Order with bar and the Distinguished Flying Cross with bar. Gibson recruited his crews by reputation. 21 bomber crews, 147 men. Most had not flown together before. The training began on April 4, 1943. The crews flew Avro Lancasters at 100 feet altitude, in formation, over reservoirs, at night, in moonlight, with no navigation lights. By May 1st, the required altitude had been reduced to 60 feet. Gibson and his deputy squadron leader Henry Maudslay demonstrated it personally to skeptical aircrew. The challenge: the standard Lancaster altimeter was not accurate to less than 50 feet at low altitude. The squadron needed accuracy to within 2 feet. The solution: twin spotlights mounted under each Lancaster's fuselage, angled to converge on the water surface at exactly 60 feet altitude. The pilot watched the converging beams. When the two circles of light merged into a single figure 8 on the water below, the aircraft was at exactly 60 feet. The targeting tool was a wooden handheld sight. The bomb aimer aligned 2 pegs of the tool with the 2 anti-torpedo towers flanking the Möhne dam. When framed, the range was exactly 425 yards. The mission was scheduled for the night of May 16-17, 1943. Gibson briefed the squadron at 1500 hours on May 16. The crews learned the targets for the first time. Möhne Dam, Eder Dam, Sorpe Dam. The men had spent 6 weeks training for these 3 dams without knowing they existed. The mission would be 3 formations. The first, of 9 Lancasters under Gibson, would attack the Möhne first and then proceed to the Eder. The second, of 5 Lancasters under Flight Lieutenant Joe McCarthy, would attack the Sorpe. The third was a reserve. Gibson's Lancaster, call sign Cooler Leader, took off from Scampton at 2128 hours on the evening of May 16, 1943. The last Lancaster of the first wave was airborne at 2149. The second wave departed between 2153 and 2200. The crossing of the North Sea was at 100 feet altitude in moonlight. Different routes to avoid concentrating the formation on enemy radar. Pilot Officer Vernon Byers's Lancaster was struck by anti-aircraft fire from the Dutch island of Texel at 2300. His aircraft cartwheeled into the IJsselmeer. All 7 crew were killed. Pilot Officer Louis Burpee struck the trees on the perimeter of Gilsrijen airfield at 040 hours. His Lancaster exploded. All 7 crew were killed. Flight Lieutenant Jeffrey Rice hit the surface of the Vaal River while flying at 60 feet. The aircraft's bomb bay scraped the water. The upkeep mine was torn loose and lost. Squadron leader Henry Maudslay's aircraft was hit by flak. His radio aerial was torn off. He could not communicate. He pressed on. By 028 hours of May 17, 1943, Gibson's first wave had reached the Möhne reservoir. The Möhne Dam was 650 meters long, 40 meters high, and contained 134 million cubic meters of water at full capacity. The dam was defended by 2 flak towers, one at each end of the dam wall, and by an anti-torpedo net suspended across the reservoir 300 meters upstream. Gibson made the first attack run himself. 220 miles per hour, 60 feet, 425 yards. His mine bounced 3 times across the reservoir surface, struck the dam wall correctly, sank against the upstream face, and detonated at 30 feet depth. The wall trembled. It did not break. Gibson banked away. He radioed the codeword for a successful drop that did not breach. The dam was still there. Pilot Officer John Hopgood, age 21, of Surrey, made the second attack at 033 hours. His Lancaster was struck by flak from the south flak tower as he descended over the reservoir. His port outer engine caught fire. Hopgood's mine released approximately 80 meters too late. It bounced over the dam wall, struck the powerhouse on the downstream side, and detonated catastrophically. Hopgood's burning Lancaster pulled up over the dam, lost 2 of its 4 engines, and crashed approximately 6 kilometers north. Of his crew of 7, 2, Flight Engineer Sergeant Charles Brennan and Bomb-Aimer Pilot Officer Anthony Bircher, survived by parachuting at low altitude. The other 5 were killed. Flight Lieutenant Mick Martin, age 24, of Sydney, Australia, the 3rd pilot, went in next at 038. To distract the flak gunners, Gibson flew alongside, drawing fire. Martin's mine bounced correctly but veered slightly to the left of the dam center. It detonated against the wall but off-center. The dam wall held. Squadron leader Melvin Dingy Young, age 28, of Belgravia, London, the deputy squadron commander, made the fourth attack at 0:43. Young's mine struck the dam wall directly in the center. It detonated at depth. The dam wall vibrated. A small leak appeared on the downstream face. The wall did not break. Flight Lieutenant David Maltby, age 23, of West Sussex, the fifth pilot, made his attack at 0:49. Maltby's mine bounced 4 times across the reservoir, struck the dam wall slightly off-center to the left, sank, and detonated at 30 feet depth. The dam wall, weakened by Young's strike 6 minutes earlier, broke. A section 76 meters wide and 22 meters deep collapsed outward into the downstream valley. Gibson, circling at 100 meters altitude, watched the breach. He radioed Bomber Command in plain English. The code word for breach was the name of his squadron mascot, a phrase no broadcast would repeat today. 330 million cubic meters of water began to leave the Möhne reservoir at 12:51 of May 17, 1943. The flood wave reached the village of Niederans, 6 kilometers downstream, at 1:03. The wave was approximately 10 meters high. It moved at 20 kilometers per hour. It would reach the Ruhr industrial city of Schwert by 0600 hours. Gibson did not stay to watch. He had 4 Lancasters of the first wave still carrying mines. The Eder Dam was the next target. The flight to the Eder took 50 minutes. The dam is approximately 70 kilometers east-southeast of the Möhne. The Eder was undefended by anti-aircraft fire. The German High Command had judged its location, in a steep valley, sufficiently secure against air attack. The Eder was much more difficult to attack than the Möhne. The dam sat at the base of a narrow steep valley with high wooded ridges on 3 sides. The attack run required descent from the ridge above, level off at 60 feet for 700 meters, then climb sharply to clear the ridge on the far side. Flight Lieutenant David Shannon, age 21, of Adelaide, Australia, attempted first. 5 attack runs without releasing, he could not align his approach correctly. Squadron leader Henry Maudslay made the second attempt. His radio had been dead since the Dutch coast. He could not coordinate his attack with Gibson. Maudslay's mine released approximately 50 meters too late. It struck the parapet on top of the dam wall and detonated above the water at the moment of release. Maudslay's aircraft was destroyed by the detonation of its own mine. It crashed in flames into the wooded ridge approximately 4 kilometers north. All 7 crew were killed. Pilot Officer Les Knight, age 22, of Houghton, Victoria, Australia, the youngest pilot of the first wave, made the final attempt at 1:56. Knight completed his approach correctly. He released at 425 yards. His mine struck the dam wall at center. The detonation breached the Eder Dam. A section 70 meters wide collapsed outward at 1:57 hours. 155 million cubic meters of water began to leave the reservoir. Meanwhile, 90 kilometers to the west, Flight Lieutenant Joe McCarthy and his second wave were attacking the Sorpe Dam. The Sorpe was different. It was an earth core dam, compacted earth around a watertight central core, not the masonry of the Möhne and Eder. The upkeep mine had been designed against masonry. Wallis had identified the Sorpe as a more difficult target during the original 1942 design phase. He had recommended attacking by running the mine along the dam crest itself. McCarthy executed Wallis's recommended approach. He flew along the dam crest at 100 feet altitude. He released his mine directly on top of the dam at 0:46. The mine rolled down the upstream face, sank against the earth core, and detonated at 30 feet depth. A small crater on the dam crest. The earth absorbed most of the blast. The dam did not breach. Flight Sergeant Ken Brown, age 23, of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, Canada, the only other Lancaster of the second wave to reach the Sorpe, made a second attack at 3:10. The dam did not breach. By 0400 of May 17, the 11 surviving Lancasters were heading west across Holland on the return flight to Scampton. Möhne and Eder breached. Sorpe cracked but standing. Squadron leader Melvin Young's Lancaster, the aircraft that had cracked the Möhne wall sufficiently for Maltby's breach, was hit by flak over the Dutch coast at 05:58. The Lancaster cartwheeled into the North Sea. All 7 crew were killed. Wing Commander Gibson's Lancaster touched down at RAF Scampton at 04:20 hours. The remaining surviving aircraft landed between 04:23 and 06:15. Of the 19 Lancasters that had taken off, 11 returned. 8 were lost. Of 133 aircrew, 53 were killed, 3 captured, and 77 returned alive. Gibson, having flown the longest mission of any pilot, 9 hours and 32 minutes, went directly to the squadron office and began the after-action telegrams to next of kin. He wrote 53 letters that morning. The first was for squadron leader Maudslay's mother. The last was for pilot officer Burpee's wife. He completed the last at 13:47. The Möhne flood wave reached the Soviet prisoner of war forced labor camp at Neum, 6 kilometers downstream, at 01:03 of May 17. The Neum camp held approximately 1,200 Soviet women, transported from the eastern occupied territories. The camp's barracks were single-story wooden structures with no flood protection. Of the approximately 1,200 Soviet women in the camp, approximately 749 were drowned in their barracks. Most were sleeping when the flood arrived. The German civilian dead, in the villages and towns downstream of both the Möhne and the Eder, totaled approximately 545. Most were elderly women and children. The total dead from Operation Chastise was approximately 1,294. The figure was confirmed by the Reich Statistical Office in October 1943. Industrial damage was significant in the immediate term. The Möhne breach destroyed 12 factories and damaged 91 others. It cut Ruhr Valley electrical generation by 40% for 10 days. Reich Minister of Armaments Albert Speer, age 38, ordered emergency repairs to begin within hours. He diverted approximately 50,000 workers from Atlantic Wall construction. The Möhne Dam was fully repaired by September 23, 1943, 4 months and 6 days after the raid. The Eder was fully repaired by September 17. The Ruhr Valley was again at full water and power capacity by October. The long-term industrial impact of the operation was, by post-war Allied assessment, limited. The British public reaction was rapturous. The breached Möhne Dam appeared on the front page of every British newspaper on May 18, 1943. 34 decorations were awarded to 617 Squadron. They included 1 Victoria Cross, to Wing Commander Guy Gibson, 5 Distinguished Service Orders, 10 Distinguished Flying Crosses, for conspicuous gallantry medals, and 12 Distinguished Flying Medals. Barnes Wallis was awarded the Commander of the Order of the British Empire. He spent the remainder of the war working on additional special-purpose weapons including the Tallboy and Grand Slam earthquake bombs. Wing Commander Guy Gibson was killed on the night of September 19, 1944, when his de Havilland Mosquito FB Mark XX crashed near the Dutch town of Steenbergen. He was 26. His body was recovered from the wreckage and buried in a Catholic cemetery at Steenbergen by local Dutch civilians on September 20, 1944. The grave was unmarked at the time. The 617 Squadron continued operations through the remainder of the war. It became the RAF Specialist Unit for precision attack against high-value targets. On November 12, 1944, 617 Squadron Lancasters dropped Tallboy bombs on the German battleship Tirpitz at her anchorage in Tromsø Fjord, Norway. The Tirpitz capsized and sank within 12 minutes. The 617 Squadron, in 2026, continues to exist. It is currently equipped with Lockheed Martin F-35B Lightning aircraft based at RAF Marham, Norfolk. Its crest still displays the original 1943 motto. Barnes Wallis lived for 36 years after Operation Chastise. He continued at Vickers Armstrongs through the post-war period, working on swing-wing aircraft and supersonic flight. He gave approximately 200 public lectures about the Operation Chastise weapon between 1945 and 1979. In every one, when discussing effectiveness, he made a single observation about the Sorpe Dam. He said, "The mine should have been used against the Sorpe. The earth core was the more difficult target, and it was the target that, if breached, would have removed the Ruhr's water for a year. He continued, "We breached the Möhne and the Eder. The Sorpe stands. The Sorpe was the dam I had wanted." Sir Barnes Wallis was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 1968. He died on October 30, 1979, aged 92. His ashes were interred at Effingham, Surrey. The headstone reads, "Inventor. Engineer. Christian." It does not mention Operation Chastise. The Möhne Dam, fully rebuilt in 1943, is, in 2026, an active hydroelectric and water supply dam. It is a tourist destination. Approximately 350,000 people visit each year. The Eder Dam, also rebuilt, is similarly active and similarly visited. The Sorpe, never breached, has not been substantially modified since 1935. All three dams have small commemorative plaques on their crest. The plaques mention the date and the number of dead. The plaques do not mention 617 Squadron. In the small German village of Neum, downstream of the Möhne, a memorial to the 749 Soviet women drowned in the camp on the night of the raid was unveiled in 1998. The memorial is a single granite block with 749 vertical lines incised on its face. It was funded by donations from German and British citizens. 43 of the donors were members of 617 Squadron. The fundraising drive was organized by Sir Barnes Wallis's eldest daughter, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Wallis, age 7 on the night of May 16-17, 1943, lived in her father's house in Effingham, Surrey, until her own death in 2017 at age 81. She had spent the last 23 years of her life giving public lectures about her father's work. Her lecture, given approximately 300 times, ended with the same sentence. She said, "My father skipped marbles across our bathtub. The marbles became a bomb. The bomb sank a dam. The dam killed 1,294 people." She continued, "He thought about each of them, every day, until he died. So do I." The 1955 British film The Dambusters, directed by Michael Anderson, dramatized Operation Chastise. It starred Michael Redgrave as Barnes Wallis and Richard Todd as Wing Commander Gibson. The film's distinctive march theme, composed by Eric Coates, became, in 1977, the inspiration for the trench run sequence in the original Star Wars film. Director George Lucas confirmed in a 2004 interview that the Death Star attack at the climax of Star Wars was reverse-engineered, shot for shot, from the climactic raid sequence in the Dambusters. What Operation Chastise asks us, 83 years after Wing Commander Gibson radioed the breach codeword from his Lancaster cockpit at 12:51 of May 17, 1943, is the same question Barnes Wallis asked in his lectures for 36 years. The question was, when a country has the engineering ability to build a weapon that can destroy a thing, and an enemy depends on the thing, what calculation does the country make about the people sleeping downstream? In 1943, the country made the calculation in favor of the engineering. The dams were broken. The water came down. 1,294 people drowned. 1,294 was, in the wartime calculation, an acceptable cost. The dam reconstruction took 4 months. The water came back. The lives did not. Wallis died grieving. His daughter died grieving. The 749 Soviet women in Neum are remembered, in 2026, on a granite block paid for in part by the men whose squadron drowned them. So this is the question Operation Chastise leaves us with. When a country builds a weapon that breaks a dam, and the dam breaks, and the country loses 53 of its own and kills 1,294 others, and the dam is repaired in 4 months, what was the calculation worth? Wallis answered the question every day until 1979. The country answered it by building a memorial in Neum. The dam answered it by being there in 2026. 1,294 people are not. Wallis is not. Gibson is not.